Hamas understands that the Israeli government is increasingly under pressure from the hostage families and perhaps from the United States as well,
yes,
to agree to a time and provide the time and space for hostage releases. And I think they seek to break up the Israeli momentum and the ground campaign and delay. This is only going to be the first of several tranches of releases in an effort to accomplish that objective.
What can you tell us about the deal?
Not absolutely sure about the deal, but it does look as if it's going to be announced after this emergency meeting of the Israeli first war cabinet and then full cabinet this evening. What we're being told is that there has been a deal done to release, not quite sure how many, probably 50, maybe as many as 75 of those Hamas hostages, mostly women and children, in return for around 150 Palestinian prisoners held by the Israelis. Again, mainly women who are held in Israeli prisons, unconnected to this particular round of fighting. There'll also be a 5-day truce in which there's possibility that more hostages may be released. Rather curiously, Hamas says it doesn't know where all the hostages are, because some were taken by other factions and that they will work with those other factions, maybe to try and win the release of those. There will be no military captives released. We know that there are, I think, around 30 Israeli soldiers amongst those hostages. They will not be released. And one thing the Israelis are very keen to make clear is that this is not an end to the fighting. It's a 5-day truce, and that they are intending to go back to pummeling Gaza and eradicating Hamas, the goal of their operation after that.
So, well, obviously, welcome news for the families and loved ones of those who are, it seems, about to be released. What would it mean for Israel and as well the politics around this particular issue? An awful lot of pressure on the leader Benjamin Netanyahu. What will this mean?
There's pressure from all sides for Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu has gone from being this sort of apparently invincible figure in Israeli politics. So, he's dominated Israeli politics for the last 2 decades. Who a Teflon prime minister? He has corruption charges against him. He's had this very controversial record. He's very much disliked by many Western leaders who are Israel's natural allies, but he's still managed to hold on there. And it's like he's sort of now it's gone the other way. He's now the end of every criticism. So the hostages, the families of the hostages are furious with him for not doing enough to get the hostages out. They're furious with some of the sort of very inflammatory rhetoric that's coming out of the government, which they say is putting their family members in Gaza at risk. And he's also getting attacked from the right of his own coalition for even engaging in talks for a ceasefire and hostage releases in the first place. The last major hostage swap came back in 2011 when an Israeli soldier was released from Hamas custody in return for hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, including the current leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip now. And the far right in Israel, even though they're in Netanyahu's cabinet, are saying you're going to do the same again. You're going to be releasing Palestinians. You're going to be giving the Palestinians a chance to regroup in Gaza. You're going to send in fuel, which they can siphon off and use for military purposes. So he's coming under attack from both sides.
All right. Great to hear from you. Thank you so much, Richard. Richard Spencer there, the Times correspondent. More on that story a little later on. Right now, I want to welcome to Drive Aaron David Miller, the former Middle East negotiator for the United States, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Welcome back to the programme, Aaron. Can I just ask...
Thanks, John, for having me.
It's good to have you as always, Aaron. Can I get some of your analysis of what seems to be happening here? It looks as if there's a deal done. It looks as if we're going to be hearing confirmation and details a little later on this evening. What is Hamas trying to achieve with this deal?
Taking hostages, and frankly, I'm not sure even they believe that they will be able to have access to so many. We're done for several reasons. Number one, ultimately to trade. You cannot underestimate the power of release of Palestinian prisoners on the Palestinian street. And all of these asymmetrical trades, 1985, 2011, when the Israelis agreed to release over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for the return of one Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, tremendous power. That's number one. Number two, Hamas understands that the Israeli government is increasingly under pressure from the hostage families and perhaps from the United States as well,
Yes.
to agree to a time and provide the time and space for hostage releases. And I think they seek to break up the Israeli momentum in the ground campaign and delay. This is only going to be the first of several tranches of releases in an effort to accomplish that objective.
Do you believe we can expect Hamas to observe this 5-day ceasefire that's being discussed? They've been pretty dismissive of the idea of ending hostilities so far.
Unclear. This is extremely complicated. Remember, you've got to figure out a way to create safe passage, both for the release of what may be 150 Palestinian women and teens in exchange for 50, 60, 75 civilians, women and children in the main. Hamas releasing these people is a station identification on the part of Hamas. You know there'll be Israeli drones and intelligence looking for locations, and they intend to use this, I think, in an effort to identify where Hamas may have the remainder of the hostages. So it gets very complicated. I think the Israelis, we're talking about a general ceasefire in northern Gaza, in southern Gaza. I'm not sure we know, John, exactly what the terms of this quote-unquote pause really are.
Right. Let's look at it for a moment, Aaron, from the Israeli side. It's reasonable to say that Benjamin Netanyahu does not want peace without total victory over Hamas, and I think it's fair to say preferably a victory for which he can claim credit.
Yes, but that credit is, it'll be Pyrrhic, if anything. This prime minister has presided over the worst intelligence failure since 1973, probably worse because it involves civilian deaths and injuries. Number two, it's the bloodiest single day for Jews since the end of the Nazi Holocaust, and the most severe terror attack in the country's history. There's no mechanism right now to remove him, but there will be a day of reckoning.
Now tell me, in Washington, do you believe the Biden administration will be gaming out an end game, a post-conflict course? Obviously, we're talking about a period, who knows how far away, but a post-conflict course of action that they might be able to encourage and maybe even broker at some point in the future?
Yes, I think they're thinking about it, but let's be clear, how this ends is going to be critically important. The so-called proverbial day after will not be a bright line between the end of Israeli military activity and the new future for post-conflict Gaza. More than likely, the Israelis will be in Gaza either with a security zone or force deployment. And there will be resurgent Hamas elements, individuals still presenting security problems. So the U.S. can do all the planning it wants, and I commend them for getting into this early, but this is a future with a lot of moving parts. And I think I mentioned before, not even Pythia, the oracle at Delphi, reading the best of Godin trails, can tell you right now, John, how this thing is going to play out.
No, I mean, so much of this, of course, is necessarily guesswork, Aaron, isn't it? And we should not then, listening to what you're saying, really look for an end point to this. When the operation to destroy Hamas, as Israel defines it, when that point is reached, we're looking at some kind of occupation, and that occupation will be marked by continuing conflict in Gaza of one kind or another. After all, Hamas is only one of the groups and forces in action here.
It could, absolutely. And not to mention the need to cater to and deal with not only the critical humanitarian needs presented by the displacement of half the population of Gaza. Winter is coming. 40% of the structures in Gaza City have been destroyed. Who's going to put their arms around this and address one of the great humanitarian issues in recent years? That's another huge dimension, not to mention the problem of reconstruction. I imagine that some sort of transitional mechanism will have to be created with the Israelis, some reconciling Israeli security needs and requirements, and trying over time. The only rational solution is Palestinian governance of Gaza. And right now, you've got a Palestinian leader, 87 years old, in the 18th year of his 4-year term, with zero credibility, Mahmoud Abbas, on the streets of the West Bank. He can't even protect his own constituents from attacks by Israeli soldiers and settlers. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of complexity, and we're about to see that unwind. This is going to be one of the more positive twists and turns in a horrific conflict, which has been cruel and unforgiving.